Serpents from the Garden of Eos. Introduction. The religion of night in the Paleolithic. Some 10,000 years ago, the first epoch of human history gradually came to an end in the Near East and Europe. Though many tribes had left the shelters of their caves and were now making artificial living quarters, the cavern was even yet, for many, the main tribal household sanctuary. Huts of mud daub erected around wicker were being used by a few communities in Hellas and other places in the Near East, though often not far from what had been the tribe's sanctuary home ever before, during the many hundreds or thousands of years of the tribe's residence. In the Old Stone Age, the Paleolithic, an anthropological period of the much larger and longer geologic Pleistocene epoch, modern humans and other hominids, such as Neanderthals, had not yet discovered the farming of plants or the herding of animals. Existence was the same old way as it had been for many millennia. The spear and the bow and fire making were still the most useful of our discoveries and inventions. The spear and bow allowed humans to hunt large mammals that provided huge amounts of fresh meat. The discovery of fire making had made the roasting of flesh a common culinary practice. Also as important was the warmth and light of the hearth fire, which had made the tribal cavern a warmer, brighter, and more secure sanctuary for these Stone Age hunters. Prehistoric timeline. From 2.5 million years BAS to 12,000 years BAS, showing the Old Stone Age and New Stone Age. Besides these discoveries of the Stone Age, the use of stone tools and fire, the development of language undoubtedly was another singular advantage they utilized in the competition with the other carnivores in their natural environment. Language produced human society. It not only gave the first modern humans a greater ability to organize their activities, but also the power of retaining knowledge within the tribal group. When, after many tens of thousands of years, the first human planted a seed in the soil with the expectation that it should result in an edible variety of budding weed, and it did this very thing, well then, this vastly momentous experiment could be described to other tribal members sitting around the cavern hearth, because they spoke similarly. Developing social structures beyond that of the familiar unit requires communication. These first tribal communities then, most likely, had some of the forms of established societies, a separation into different groups for different activities important to the tribe. Since common languages already existed at some level of community during the Stone Age, this made the rapid spread of agricultural knowledge possible in the new Neolithic epoch that followed upon the discovery of agrarian skills. The myth of Triptolemus is in a very real story, whoever he may have been, or whatever his names really were. After the success of that first seed-sowing experiment made by someone, there had to be many individuals that carried this new agrarian science to and between the many scattered tribes. Therefore, thousands of years later, you have the myth of Triptolemus, his Demetrian agrarian mission, and his rapid-flying chariot drawn by dragons. The myth itself is most likely not factual, though it does relate the circumstances of this eventful stage in the spread of agriculture and the transition from the Old Stone Age to the New Stone Age. In this particular instance, the transition between old and new epochs is based upon a very exact demarcation. The Old Stone Age had no knowledge of growing wild plant weeds for food, and the New Stone Age was the first epoch in which wild occurring plant weeds were cultivated in the earliest gardens. Neolithic Timeline. From 20,000 years BAS to 5,000 years BAS, showing the late Paleolithic and the 7,000 year length of the Neolithic up to the Egyptian First Dynasty. Before the Neolithic, humans had no gardens because they didn't understand that the sowing of seeds produces new plants. This tremendously vital discovery was made by someone somewhere in the Near East at the very end of the Old Stone Age, between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. Who was he or she that made such a discovery, making possible the development of human civilization? Before this person, humans lived in caves. After this person, humans built the first villages. This discovery was only made some 10,000 years ago. The first modern humans as a species appeared 60,000 to 100,000 years ago. For whatever reason, this must have been a very difficult idea for humans to comprehend. The idea that seeds produce life. Until this person understood that life came from seeds, humans had gathered wild weeds, nuts, and fruit to supplement their carnivorous diet of hunted flesh. And this is how we got whatever we ate for 50,000 to 100,000 years. Human progress was extremely slow in the Stone Age, That is, until someone finally understood what seeds were for and what made them grow. It is unlikely now that we shall ever determine who this great discoverer was after 10,000 years or so have passed into history. We might, however, make a very good guess as to where the discoverer lived and what this person may have thought about life, nature, and existence. The study of things preserved from this epoch may provide enough information to deduce where the discovery was made and what the society of the discoverer thought of the world. Language, myth, and physical artifacts may give us enough knowledge of the new Stone Age and its origins, enough so that we may make a pretty good guess about the discoverer's location, society, and religious beliefs. The question then is, where did the new Stone Age first start at? The theory being pursued here is that agriculture had its start in Egypt. More specifically, the great discoverer of agrarian science was an Egyptian priestess of Isis and Lord Set, the serpent deities of the grain fields. The Serpent God and Goddess were extremely ancient deities first worshipped in the Old Stone Age, and it was only with the discovery of agrarian science that these deities became the supreme Lord and Lady of latter days. Ancient Egyptian religious belief seems to have had two main sources. The first and earliest of these sources was the layer of belief having to do with the great hunter and master of animals, the mate of the mother goddess of night and mistress of the animals. The other later source was an addition from the New Stone Age, when a pair of offspring of these primordial gods became the totem masters of the new crop fields first cultivated in the new epoch. The great hunter and the mother goddess of night were, most likely, the first deities that humans worshiped. Some while later, in the Old Stone Age, as human culture progressed with increased understanding of its world, this initial pair of deities was added to with new gods and goddesses that were the totems of divine spirit moving through the different elements of nature and existence. The new deities were thought of as the offspring of the first primordial male and female deities, the hunter and the night, whereas the first primordial male and female were thought of as deities encompassing the totality of existence, and night was the creatrix of the world. The new divine offspring were merely totems of their primordial spirit moving within the elements of their created world. It is likely that these new deities, the divine elemental offspring, were only added later to the Paleolithic Old Stone Age pantheon, when humans had progressed somewhat in their culture and organization and speech. For instance, it seems that the first of these new offspring deities most likely came into the imagination of the Stone Age cave dwellers discovery of fire. The further development of language and mythos added to the tribal organization and made the other new deity offspring, after the mythic birth of fire and water, occurred to their imaginations, and the specialized and new tribal activities were thus made possible. So, even in the Old Stone Age, there was a continuing progress in the evolving mythos and religion of these hunters and gatherers, an evolving mythos and religion of nature that was based on human understanding of the world and progressed by changes made in accordance with advancements in the tribe's technology, language, and socially structured activities. The fact that very few changes or additions were made to their natural mythos of the hunter and the night shows that human progress in this first epoch of human history was extremely slow. Old Stone Age mythos and religion changed so slightly during these tens of thousands of years because human society and knowledge advanced but slowly in the same way. So, at the start of the Neolithic, New Stone Age, there was in the mythic nature religion of these cave-dwelling hunters and gatherers a supernal horned hunter of the sun as father of the gods, and there was his supernal mate, the night goddess of the moon, and the earth as the creatrix, mother of the gods. This primordial pair had already 6 offspring, elemental deities who shared in the characters of their parents by the end of the Paleolithic, when a discovery caused the epochal change into a new age of stone. With the start of the Neolithic, one of these pairs of offspring became far more important than the remaining members of the Old Stone Age pantheon. This pair eclipsed the other members of the deistic system in importance, even the prior pairing of the hunter and the knight, as well as their siblings. The new pair of deities that rose to prominence in the Neolithic was the Serpent God and the Serpent Goddess, the offspring of the former primordial pairing of horned hunter and night goddess. The reason this happened at the start of the Neolithic had to do with the discovery of agriculture. The serpent deities were the totem deities of the new agrarian fields of the grain crops. This mythic change, occurring at the start of the Neolithic, provides an important glimpse into the Old Stone Age cavern, where the society of the discoverer lived as a tribe of hunters and gatherers on the cusp of 2 great epochs. The Paleolithic mythology of this first epoch can be reconstructed with 2 main primordial deities that form a mating pair, along with their eventual offspring of 6 lesser deities grouped in 3 pairs based upon similarities of characteristics. Egyptian Ennead without supreme creator god. Shu, Tefnut, Nu, Isis, Osiris, Set, Nephthys, Horus. Neb or Chair, Supreme Creator God. Osiris, Anu, Uranus, Day, Energy of Creator. Horned Hunter, Sun and Moon God. Nu, Nyx, Night. Creatrix, Dark Material Sea. Night Huntress, Mistress of Fauna. Sky, Stars, Moon, Underworld of Earth. Shu, Eros, Kronos, Light, Fire, Air, Fertility. Tefnut, Eos, Rhea, Dark, Water, Rain, Fertility. Set, Dionysus, Serpent God of Corn. Isis, Persephone, Serpent Goddess of Corn. Horus, Apollo, Hawk God of Sun. Life, Death, Energy. Nephthys, Nekhbet, Artemis, Vulture Goddess of Sun. Vulture of Life, Death, Excarnation. The primordial Paleolithic father deity was the Horned Hunter, master of animals, and lord of the hunt. His mate was the Night Mother of the earth, mistress of life and animals. The Horned Hunter was the sun. The Night Mother was the moon. Mother of the earth, she was also the womb of the tribal cavern. The first pair of offspring from the great hunter and the night was Eros and Eos, the twilight and the dawn. This pair inherited these qualities from their parents, the hunter of day and the goddess of night. Eros was the male result of their union in the twilight. Eos was the female result of their union in the dawn. Eros was the end of day, and Eos was the end of night. Eros was also the light, the fire, male eroticism, torches, and the phallus. Eos, his sister, was the dark, the waters, female eroticism, and the waters of birth. The next pair of siblings born were the serpent deities of death and life from the egg of creation. Serpents were the first domestic creatures. Serpents and serpent eggs were an early secondary food source. It is very likely that captured live serpents were kept and cultivated in a certain sanctuary chamber of the tribal cavern. Serpent eggs and, in times of scarce hunting, serpent meat were then available to supplement the diet. The slow-ass snake could neither run or fly away, and was easy to keep in certain slippery chambers far within the cave. The next pair of siblings were the bird deities of death and life from the egg of creation. Birds were most likely the next creature to be domesticated. Originally, these birds were the vulture that fed upon decaying remains as scavengers. After some while of close human cohabitation, these scavenging birds eventually became sort of tame to human proximity. As with the other four siblings, the Vulture deities took attributes from both parents. They were hunters and scavengers like their father, the great horned hunter of day, and they were regenerative of life and creation, as was their mother, the night goddess of earth. Eggs hatched new life, were a source of food, and were thus regenerative of life, as was the night goddess of the cavern moon. This, then, was the pantheon of the immortal family of gods in the Old Stone Age. It is likely that this same group of deities was worshipped over a wide-ranging area for many thousands of years, from Europe to the Mediterranean to the Near East and beyond. Caverns were not merely natural homes and shelters. They were also temples and sanctuaries for the tribe. The cavern was the womb of the night goddess of earth, warm in a constant temperature throughout the year, a water source and a food source. The cavern was human sanctuary and a source of life sustenance. After death, it was also a necropolis for the bones of the ancestors, who returned to the great goddess of life and death for reincarnation into another life. At the entrance to the cavern was the hearth of Eros, the hearth of fire, that was kept burning the brightest from twilight to dawn. This was a tribal community center where the tribe's food was roasted, entertainments were given, and discussions took place. If the tribe had a water source within the cavern, this pool or stream may have been given the name of Eos. Common speech within the tribe allowed greater organization and a mythos to develop. The males were hunters with a totem of the great horned hunter. The great hunter was a master of animals, especially those with horns. The hunters wore masks topped with the horns of their kills in the evenings at the sacrifice carving and roasting. The women had their own societies of the serpent and the vulture, totem creatures of their practices of gathering and scavenging food for the tribe. The serpent and vulture were also totem creatures of nature's night cycle of life and death. Their eggs were gathered in or scavenged and made a tasty food source to supplement meat from the sacred hunt. Creation was thought to have started as an egg, especially one from the soil, such as were the eggs of the serpent. The horns of the great hunter were from the horned and tusked creatures that were hunted as a primary food source, such as the deer, boar, and bison. The horns, though, had the reversal or antithesis in the fangs of animal predators with which the hunters competed for food. So, the horned hunter and the tribe were feeding on the hunt's meat sacrifice and did not think of themselves as a prey. The moon sometimes took the form of the horns, and this was most likely a festal occasion, betokening a union of the great hunter and the goddess of night. This sacred festival of union between the hunter and the night was more regularly practiced each month, though at the full of the moon. Serpents were the first creatures to be domesticated by the tribe. They were easy to catch and keep within the cavern. Their eggs were a good supplement to the Stone Age diet. When the hunt was scarce, snake meat could be rationed from the stock of slitherers living in the Serpent temple chamber. The women of the Serpent Society were responsible for feeding and maintaining the Serpent Sanctuary. They gathered the eggs and captured new serpents. They fed the creatures from the remains of the hunt's sacrifice and roasting. Blood, bones, guts, and fat were taken away from the labyrinth chamber, where the chief hunter slaughtered the hunting kill by the women of the Serpent Society, who then carried this offering to the Serpent Sanctuary. The Serpent Priestess of the Moon then fed these remains to the tribe's sacred serpents that lived far back through the dim passages of the cavern, inside the dark chamber of Dis. This was a holy task of devotion for many reasons, the first of which was that the serpents were the offspring of the Serpent Goddess of Night, who was an ultimate deity in relation to the Goddess of Night. The serpents were Chthonian, born of the soil deep within the dark womb cavern of Earth. Therefore, the serpents were holy creatures of ultimate descent, as were humans. One of the benefits of this sacred devotion was an alternate reserve source of food, usually taken as a dietary supplement in the form of eggs, though occasionally, in days of scarcity, the serpents could also be eaten as a source of meat. And then there was the additional service the serpents provided by eliminating the wasted portion of animal remains left over from the hunt's labyrinth sacrifice. It was all very neat and tidily done, except perhaps the last scene of the offering deep in the torchlit sanctuary of the Serpent Goddess. Stone Age religious practices may sound a bit grisly to us ultramoderns living in an electric-powered space age, though it must be remembered that our ancestors had no modern conveniences such as refrigerators, vacuums, or disposals. The serpents and humans were both thought of as Chthonian, and they lived a reciprocal arrangement that was mutually benefiting. It was a good, safe, and economical way of eliminating waste from animal carcasses without stench and the undesirable attraction of large carnivorous scavengers, a sort of Stone Age garbage disposal. Thing is, the stoners didn't think of the serpents as disposals. For them, in in the Serpent Society, the serpents were sacred creatures, the offspring of the Serpent Goddess of Night. More likely, they saw themselves as sharing their food with these sacred snakes. The serpents merely got the least humanly desired portions, as they had always received ever since Eros, Prometheus, tricked them into choosing these leftover remains from the sacrifice instead of the better meaty portions we humans get. In the summer, the serpent priestess took her creatures outside for a while to give them some fresh air and shadowy sunlight. Large chasms were dug for this purpose and probably even served to capture some hapless wild game that happened to fall in. The Serpent Society checked these outdoor summer serpent chasms daily and gathered in some bonus free game every once in a while. The larger stuff became a barbecue treat on the hearth grill, while everything else was left to be gamesomely devoured by the holy sacred pets of the serpent priestess. Perhaps this summer airing of the snakes had a ritual and magical function as well, the success of the snakes being linked to Mother Earth's fruitful yield and successful hunting in some way. Maybe by giving the serpents extra kill and more meat, they hoped the serpent goddess might do the same for them by helping them have more success in the hunt. And besides, it was probably necessary to maintain the Caverns sanctuary of the serpent as well. Since the serpents and humans were both thought of as Chthonian from the earth and from the cavern, then it may well have been a seasonal type thing. The tribe having more outdoor activity in the summer, then by extension, our serpent brethren of the earth cavern should have their brighter summer, same as us. Another thing, you should probably imagine sharpened stakes placed in these outdoor offering pits so as to kill or injure any really large drop-ins that might have happened by, in order to minimize casualties among the sacred serpents. One ancient day in the latest Paleolithic, the serpent priestess stepped outside the tribal cavern to check on those snakes of hers in the outdoor chasm. She and the society girls stopped in their walk to the chasm so as to gather some fresh blossoms in a meadow by the way. After gathering the first of summer's blooms, the priestesses proceeded on to the chasm offering pit, where it lay covered by wicker branches and tall grasses. Nearing the pit, the priestesses paused to make observance and pour a libation to the stone of Eros. Before this could be done, however, the high priestess had to adjust the mask of the serpent, strapping it more tightly against the top of the carved cromlech. After the thick blood had oozed into the fresh soil, the priestesses each offered a bloom at the base of the hewn rock. This done, they moved singly and slowly to where the grassy branches stretched over the opening to the nether abyss, where they again placed the morning's blooms, fresh and yet with dew. The last society girl, having placed her bright bud somewhere in the camouflage, the high priestess of the serpent clambered down into the dim and shadowy offering pit of the goddess. Observing no new, fresh carcasses upon the swarming floor, she was ready to ask for last night's libation and offering from the labyrinth's sacrifice, when with some surprise and amusement, her gaze glanced upon a fresh and new sprouting bloom growing from the loose earth. It wasn't some wilted specimen, as it might be from some previous day's offering for the ever so often gathered flowers. No, this lone flower grew from the bottom of the offering pit, and the soil was smooth around it, with flowing dark swirls in the shadowy light. Thoughtlessly, and thinking only of the flower, she stooped down and plucked it from where it grew above the large, rounded coils of an awakened and hissing ancestor. Fortunately, it was a favorite, and allowed her familiar hand to pass near without harming her. Later, in their walk back to Aornos, she placed the earth blossom in her flowing hair and wondered how a flower could have bloomed in the shadows of the offering abyss. The myth of Persephone's descent could very well be the mythico-historical story of agrarian discovery. The myth might even give us the name of the serpent priestess who first discovered the power of seeds. Was this serpent priestess a Hellene or a Minoan? Perhaps she was, though it seems more likely that Persephone, if that was her name, was an Egyptian, and the Hellene myth is a retelling of the story in a different region from where it historically happened. The religion of the Paleolithic was a religion of nature. Paleolithic humans worshipped the creatrix of the natural world of existence. Survival was difficult in the Pleistocene. Food and shelter were the most important ideas most often upon the minds of Stone Age humans. You should expect then that the religion should, in some way, show how the daily struggle for survival and safety was central in their lives. The deities of the Old Stone Age were much like those of later epics in that they were personifications of the phenomena of nature. Existence was thought to be created, a creation of deity. God or gods moved within nature, making things happen in a certain regular way. They had no science, and so did not have the added benefit of knowing the mathematical or elemental language of the deity. Yet mathematics and science are not necessary to understand the general situation of existence, that a deity created everything, and that this deity moves within naturally occurring phenomena at certain moments. For the humans of the Stone Age, what was important was survival, and this depended upon food and shelter. The God that created the universe was thought of in human terms with characteristics similar to the creatures with which the world was filled. The main deities of their world were its most prominent and supernal parts, the stars, moon, and sun. Uranos, the hunter, was not simply a god master of beasts. Uranos was also the sky of day and the sun. Nuit, or Neith, was not simply the mother goddess of earth and the cavern. She was the night starry sky and the moon. These were supernal deities of ultimate creation, and everything that existed had hatched from the great egg of the stars in the night. At first, this mating pair of deities were probably thought of primarily as the cosmological source of the totality of existence. The primordial male and female were the division or union of reality into the day and the night. From this primal union of partitioning in their lives, they saw everything else of creation proceeding forthwith. Male and female also composed a basic division of reality that continued life within the world. Therefore, proceeding logically and without a scientific language, the deity was mythologized into the most basic, productive unions of reality. The union of day and night produced the world of nature. Day was male and night was female. This explained God, or the gods, in human terms of understanding in the Old Stone Age, and the deity who produced the creation could be imagined every day and night. This wasn't enough, though, as the language and mythos of the tribe continued to expand. With the ongoing survival of the society within the cavern, other phenomena of the natural came to be thought of as having some sort of spiritual presence within them. The day was produced by the light of the sun, so, proceeding with the same logic, therefore, the sun was also God. Then there was the night sky of stars, with its infinite twinklings, and a moon that had some sort of regular cycle of motion, which was also in a numerical harmony with the passing of the seasons. So, yes sir, you bet, the moon was also a goddess. Even this wasn't enough, though. What about the earth itself, the world's soil, and the flora and fauna that lived upon it? Well, this was explained by the same expedient. The earth was the night goddess, same as the moon was. How so? The hunters may have asked. Think, isn't the cave within which we live dark as night, and dark even during the day? Sure, but night's up there with the stars, pointing up. It is the same goddess. Dark is dark, and night is night. The sky is merely the top, and the soil the bottom. She is the night earth goddess who shines with the moon. Same goddess. The sun is the day god of light. Reality was made a union of the day sun and the night moon. From their union came everything in existence. It was also a primary demarcation of the natural world. Human life is an alternating series of days and nights. These primordial gods of the universe were not merely far away in the sky above. The spiritual presence of these deities could be noticed in the world of earthy phenomena as well. The night goddess of the moon was also the earth mother goddess. Tribal caverns were a sanctuary for human habitation provided by the earth goddess of night. Caverns were vaginas and boneyards of human life. Darkness within the cave was another aspect of night. After the primordial union of day and night established the basis of the mythic theology of existence, the life of the tribe was understood as merging with a new cosmology. Hunting provided the tribe's main food source, and wild game was most plentiful in the summer when the day was longest and the sun was highest in the sky. The horned god of the hunt, who brought success in this vital activity, had the most beneficial power when his sunlight shone longer and with more warmth. The sun and the horned god were then thought of as the same deity by the hunters of the Stone Age. The night was the female power of creation, present in the soil of earth and the moon. The tribe's cavern was her especial domain. Human life returned to the soil of her womb when the bones of the ancestors were buried within it. Somewhat later in the epic, the snakes of the serpent cult were thought of as similarly akin to the spirits of the ancestors, being reborn from the same cavern womb of dark earth. The lunar cycle was nearly equivalent to the menstrual period, and made the moon of the goddess, and opposite to the male sun and day. There was another discovery as important to human progress as was that of planting seeds and cultivating them, and that was the making of fire. The discovery of fire was made during the Paleolithic, and we roasted our meat from the hunt long before we ate homegrown veggies. This important discovery, like that of seed planting much later, produced an introduction of new deities into the first primordial religion of Uranus, the hunter, and Nuit, the knight. The hunter and the knight had a pair of offspring that most probably resulted from the discovery of fire. The male god of this pair was the fire, and the female goddess was water. Cosmologically, the male fire god was the twilight, and his sister was the dawn. In the speech of their much distant descendant cousins, the Hellenes, these deities were named Eros and Eos. They also came to be thought of, even at this early epoch, as deities of human love and eroticism. They were the primal emotional urges that produced union between the male and female in natural creation. The tribe's hunters returned to the cavern at nightfall after the day's hunt. Eros and Eos were then the first offspring pair that resulted from the union of day and night. They shared in the attributes of their primordial parents. Eros was the light, the fire, the twilight, and male eroticism. Eos was the dark, the water, the dawn, and female eroticism. Eros was the phallic torch quenched in the waters of earth. The tribal hearth of the cavern's entrance was Eros of the fire. The hearth was made to burn the brightest from twilight to dawn. The phallic torch of Eros was quenched, then smoldered in the yoni sea of the waters of Eos. The phallic totems of later orgiastic cults have their origin in old Stone Age torches that lit the Eos darkness of the cavern's stalagmite interior. Human love and eroticism became deities when fire and water were united in the dark cave of night during the Paleolithic. Eros and Eos had 4 more siblings eventually that also formed similar pairings based upon their shared and inherited characteristics. Shu and Tefnut were Eros and Eos in Egyptian mythology. Isis and Set were the serpent gods of the grain fields. Horus and Nephthys Nekhbet were the bird gods of the sun. The next pair of offspring, born to the hunter of the sun and the night goddess of earth and moon, were the serpent deities of night. These serpent deities were added to the mythology when the first creature was made domestic in the tribal cavern. A certain society of women gatherers was responsible for their care and feeding as priestesses of the sacred serpents. These priestesses gathered snake eggs for food and prepared snake meat for roasting when the hunt was scarce. They also made the offerings when the sacred snakes were fed with sacrifice remains after the hunt's labyrinth carving. The last pair of siblings were the vulture deities of scavenger birds. Like the serpents, the vulture deities were added to the mythos when the first species of birds became domestic. These domestics also required feeding from the carcass remains left over from the hunt sacrifice. And another society of women scavengers became priestesses of the vultures. The real revolution in Stone Age mythology comes with the introduction of seed planting for crop yields at the start of the Neolithic or New Stone Age. When Neolithic crop cultivation starts, the serpent deities of night rise to the rulership of the religious mythic pantheon. This is because the Serpent Society of Gatherers discovered agrarian seed planting technology, and because snake eggs hatch in the soil. Another reason for this rise of the serpent deities has to do with their place in the mythology as kindred spirits of humans. Serpents and humans are both earthborn, or Chthonian. Set and Isis were the names of these deities in the Egyptian religion. The serpents of the new agrarian science of crop cultivation. This god and goddess, the spiritual presence and offspring of the primordial sun and moon, caused the growth of the new cultivated food source and the renewal of life from the seeds sown into a harvest. The life of our ancestors was very simple, savage, and difficult. Nature had not many comforts for the human animal, and those things of existence that seemed most benevolent and pleasurable were few. What was good for human survival and what produced enjoyment were the same, and these things produced a healthy human individual and tribe. Food, shelter, procreation, warmth, and light. The first gods of the natural mythology were then the totems of these things good for the human animal in the struggle for survival in a harsh, though sustaining, wholly primitive world. Life was a union of the light and the dark, days of hunting and searching for food, and nights of communing around the hearth fire entrance of the cavern home. God was good. God was in nature. God created the world of existence. The most significant changes in nature were the actions of the gods and became the gods. The last pair of mythical beings added to the already agelessly ancient Paleolithic religion were the vulture deities of the sky. The vulture was chosen as a totem for the progeny of the sun god of day because it was a scavenger of food with a close association to humans. The eggs of birds, including those of vultures, were a tasty culinary delicacy. Eggs were known to hatch and produce regeneration of life. Vultures and large avians were hunted as a food source, and scavenger birds were useful to human scavenging of kills made by other creatures. And then, vultures were a death bird that helped to dispose of human remains that were left to the elements upon open-air mortuary platforms. The reason for this practice was because it was only the bones, once cleaned, that were buried inside the cavern home of the tribe. Stone Age humans had no knowledge of modern mortuary science that allowed for preservation of human flesh. The vulture and certain other large scavenging birds were then closely linked to the life cycle in general, and the human life cycle in particular. The vulture was a totem deity of both life and death. The eggs and meat of vultures and other birds was an important source of food, and the egg was a way in which life was regenerated. Birds and snakes being the more common types of creatures producing them. Life, food, death. You are born, you hunt, scavenge, and eat. You procreate, you die. Everything was seen as starting with the egg. The vulture even helped with the journey back into the cavern womb, the yoni of earth and night, from which the individual was to be reincarnated into their next life, once their bones were cleansed and purified by the feathered scavenger of the sky and the sun. Horus and Nephthys Nekbet were the Egyptian deities of sun and sky that had the form of large birds, the hawk and the vulture. Nephthys, or Nekbet, was the vulture goddess of the western desert necropolis. She kept the sacred egg of creation warmed in Heliopolis, the city of the sun. Horus, originally her brother, was like her, the offspring of the sun and the moon. Pharaoh was this living Horus, hawk god of the sun. Four of the offspring of the hunter and the night have been given Egyptian names here. There are Horus and Nephthys, the birds of the sun, and Set and Isis, the serpents of the harvest. The other pair of siblings, and most likely the oldest, are given the Hellenic names of Eros and Eos because it was easier to place them in Greek mythology. This doesn't infer that Greek myth is the older source, is simply because these deities were easier to comprehend in this mythos. If anything, Egyptian myth is much more ancient. The Greek Eros and Eos must come from a most bedrock-like stratum of religion dating back to the very earliest development of religion in the old European of the Stone Age. At first, these gods were included because of the twilight and dawn connection with eroticism and primordial union. It was only later that their attributes were linked with fire and water and the light and the dark. Then finally, they were made the eldest pair of the siblings. The goddess of night was Nuit, or night in the ancient Egyptian, a variation from the delta of Lower Egypt is the name of a different goddess named Neith, who seems very similar to the same primordial night goddess. Uranos is the name here given to the horned hunter of day. This is from Hellene mythology and was chosen to show the similarity between many of the deities worshipped by the Egyptians and Hellenes, even some of the most ancient. Uranos, it seems, is the Greek word for Osiris. Both of them, the Greek and the Egyptian, originally being names descended from the oldest Egyptian word for the horned hunter of day. Another similar name that shows the similarity between them is the Greek word for the hunter of the night sky, the Orion of Greek myth. These variations, Greek and Egyptian, perhaps all come from the ancient name of the city of the sun, the city the Egyptians called Anu, and the Greeks Heliopolis. It is very possible, it seems, that the city of Anu was named after the horned hunter of the sun, his ancient name being Anu. This makes one expect that the original name of Nuit, or night, was simply Nu, and then maybe the name Anu first meant something like the not night, or the opposite of night. The not night and the night, Anu and Nu, may have been the primordial deities of the day and the night that the first modern humans of the old Stone Age first worshipped. The distant epics of ancient Egyptian religion could perhaps have their genealogical descent from this first primordial cosmologic union of the god and goddess of the old Stone Age, Anu the hunter and Nu the night. Lord Set rules the Garden